We've allowed enough time now, I think, so we shall kick off. Welcome everybody to this webinar entitled Rapid Mass Engagement. So my name is Simon Elias, Director of the Lean Company System, and the purpose of this session is to introduce the book Rapid Mass Engagement by Frank Devine, explore some of its themes and messages, and obviously gain some insights into some key topics and issues. We've allowed up to 90 minutes for this. If we run out of steam, we'll finish earlier. We're recording this and put it on a website as plus the other outputs after the session. In terms of the agenda, after this introduction, I'll just go over how we're going to operate the session. Frank then is going to give a brief overview of the book, some of the key themes and messages, and then we'll spend some time, most of the time, going through the polls, the pre-prepared questions we put together that you're going to answer, and then there'll be some commentary based on those answers that you provide. If there may be some time for additional questions after, depending on how we go. So that's the session. In terms of general introduction, I'm pleased to introduce Frank. Frank is actually on holiday in Greece at the moment, no doubt in his super yacht in moored off some island somewhere, but so we hope the connection maintained. Frank, I first met Frank, it must have been about 1999 at the Lean Enterprise Research Centre, where we just launched a new MSc in Lean Operations, and the course director, John Buccino, brought in Frank to run the People and Teams module. That was a core part of that. So Frank been many years delivering that, plus on our executive education short courses during the first decade or so of this century. He also founded his own business, Accelerated Improvement, which, as you can guess from the book, specializes in creating a high-performance continuous improvement culture from the bottom up, plus leadership development stuff as well. So that's Frank. He's very pleased to have him here. His modules are always one of the most popular ones on the courses that we ran. So the topic matter has always been of high relevance and saliency for all practitioners.
Thank you, Sam.
Okay. So, as I said, we're going to use polls to generate interaction and insights. We've got some prepared questions. We may not get to them all, but we've got certainly enough to keep us going. Most of you are probably familiar with Mentimeter, but we've got some of the facilities are, for example, you can make stat comments on particular poll results where the comment is displayed for a few seconds in the presentation view, and then it'll disappear and then not saved. So those are quite useful for instant comments. Otherwise, you can make general comments which are saved via the Zoom chat facility, or pose additional questions that we can bring forward. And then if you've got time, we may have some time for questions at the end via the Mentimeter facility. Keep yourself on mute, obviously, as you're going to ask a question. And as I said, we're using Mentimeter for polls. I'm sure most of you have now used Mentimeter. Most of you hopefully have integrated it with your Zoom desktop. That's what they recommend for the best experience. You can access via a web browser or even via a mobile, and there's a QR code shown on all the slides if you need to do that. And you can use a phone then in that case, or a separate PC window. So that's it. And of course, the other thing I've got to mention, we've got an exciting prize draw. We've got 5 books, Rapid Mass Engagement, to give away. So if you want to enter that draw, simply put your name and prize draw in the chat, and we'll extract those at the end of the session. Well, next we'll probably do a draw and post the books to the lucky winners. Okay. That's it really. That's all I wanted to say as a means of introduction. I can hand over to Frank now, who's going to provide an overview of rapid mass engagement. I'll drive, Frank, so you just signal when you want the next slide to be
Okay, well, welcome everybody. This whole body of thought, if you like, originated from years and years of frustration when I was senior director, HR director of big organizations, and trying to make culture change stick, and was constantly disappointed when some key individuals maybe moved on, got promoted or whatever, the progress we'd made, which we seem to have made to have changed the culture, often dissipated over time. So that frustration led me to think, can we do this a different way? So instead of trying to do it top down, could we, if you like, create pull for continuous improvement? Could we create a desire, an emotional commitment and desire in a workforce to want to continuously improve, and then we can then add the appropriate tools, etc., to make that work. So try and create a bottom-up energy and commitment combined with top-down excellence and understanding of how to make improvement happen in practice. And that was the reason for my involvement in the Cardiff and later the Buckingham Masters. So if we just look at the agenda, Simon, what I'm going to try and cover, I'm just going to show you some of the reviews, because I think it's important that you know that the book has been well reviewed so far. I mean, it may change after this session, but so far the reviews are pretty good. We're going to look at then the most common mistakes organizations are making. The reason for doing that is so that you can look in your own organization and see, are you making this mistake, or is there a danger you might make this mistake, and then adjust early enough so that you avoid it. So we're going to try and predict and prevent common engagement mistakes. Then throw out a kind of challenge for leaders, explain what rapid mass engagement actually is. Some of the people on here probably are familiar with it from some of the organizations that have successfully operated it, but I can't assume that. So we'll kind of explain what the actual process of rapid mass engagement actually is. Then we're going to look at the leveraging effect of lean leadership and engagement, the additional benefits you get when you leverage each with the other, and don't in your organizations try and drive them in separate functions and in a non-aligned manner, which often happens. And then I'll look at, based on the experience over the last 25 years since we've been doing this, who are the people who benefit the most? So what kind of organizations and what kind of situations gain the most benefit from this kind of process? Because it's not suitable for all organizations in all situations. Although there are kind of alternative options that some organizations do, it's important to know what the key situations are where this will be very, very useful. So if we can just have a quick look at some of the reviews. TWI Wallace Hop saying that this has taken us beyond the Toyota lean efficiency into kind of new areas. That was a nice comment. Dave Stojakovic, who's the CI director in Nipro Packaging in the US, said it was by reading this book and actually before that, even just being familiar with this body of thinking, it made him realize what was missing from a lot of the books he's read. Coca-Cola, John McGowan, he believes it's essential reading for any senior team at any stage of maturity. I agree with him on that. I think it's essential reading, but not all organizations will want to pursue this for the reasons I explain in the book. And then Wayne Chin in Taiwan, Heckel is the way Bechtel is branded in Taiwan, talks about the building trust and the maximizing discretionary effort, etc. And he suggested to McGraw-Hill that they should publish one in Mandarin, which was a good suggestion, I think. So let's have a look at these common engagement mistakes. So one of the most important and most common things I find is for any organization considering rapid mass engagement, I have something called a diagnostic and decision-making event. Usually a day, sometimes it can take longer depending on the power situation at corporate and things like that. But what often happens is the senior team wants to achieve very, very high levels of engagement, but the processes that they're currently using are just simply not powerful enough to deliver. So the ambition is high, but the method, the means to get there, to that end, is not powerful enough. So it's a key mistake. You essentially, you don't go into a gunfight with a knife. So if you want to achieve very, very radical, quick, and that's a rapid in rapid mass engagement, changes to your culture, you need to do pretty radical things, which change the way employees see work, the way employees see their management, and the way employees see themselves. And the power of that has to be strong enough to meet what you're trying to achieve. Usually it isn't. Timid engagement is related to that, where organizations behave like, you see, if you've ever been to the seaside, you'll see people and they'll approach the water like as if it was some sort of chemical gas. You know, they stick their toe in and then maybe 2 or 3 toes, maybe up to their ankle. So if you want to make big changes, you can't be timid about it. You've got to be all in, committed to doing this right. Naive engagement's the direct opposite. This is where you get people saying things like, no one goes to work to do a bad job. By the way, that's factually not a correct statement. It's a nice philosophy, I suppose, but it's factually not correct. And then the follow-up statement is, well, if we just employ good people and leave them alone, they will produce great results. That's incredibly naive. If you create a power vacuum, all that we can guarantee is that somebody will fill the vacuum. The hope that the people who fill that vacuum will always be good actors is very naive. And I've seen examples where the power vacuum has been filled by bad actors, leading to abuse of vulnerable employees and all sorts of other dangerous things. So the key philosophical message here is that you increase engagement by sharing power, not by giving it away completely. If you do that, you lose control over a whole lot of things, including the science behind improvement. Another common error is to do a lot of work on engagement, but not understand the power of enablement. Essentially, enablement is removing the barriers that we accidentally usually create that frustrate an engaged workforce. So if our recruitment and promotion policies, for example, effectively exclude anyone who's not a graduate, think of graduate nurses, also graduate police officers, you know, these are major public policy errors, then no matter how engaged the employee is, coming across a barrier which has no logical sense to them or to anybody else really, who understands how employees think about themselves and their work, will destroy the engagement very, very quickly. So we have to both remove barriers that prevent, for example, a shop floor employee becoming a director of the business. Anything that gets in the way of that pathway is to be removed. And usually in the rapid mass engagement, the idea is to remove that pretty damn quickly so that the engagement and the enablement, the engagement comes first, but the enablement needs to come pretty soon after that. The process only mindset, you get the statement that the best a bad process will always be an engaged employee. That's true. But the logical leap that says, therefore, we don't need to work on engagement and enablement and culture and leadership is, not a justified logical leap. The way I look at this is, if we've got a 4-cylinder engine, why would we try and run it on 2 cylinders? Let's get the process stuff great. Of course, we need to do that. We need to understand the science behind that. We need to understand what works and what doesn't. But simultaneously work on the engagement, the enablement, the culture, the leadership, etc. And the last one is, unfortunately, there's a lot of problems with conventional leadership development. I've written articles on this. And most organizations then rely on the conventional leadership development that happens to exist in their organizations to support what they're trying to do with continuous improvement, with lean, with engagement, with enablement. And the problem is, it's very problematic to do that. There's a whole lot of major problems with the way we train leaders. And essentially, I've done a little summary there, a series of non-integrated, narrowly specialized, insufficiently prioritized interventions, which rarely move the dial, yet absorb leaders' precious time. So you do need to think really, really carefully about the leadership stuff that you're using to make this work. And the actual process itself comes with a specific Pareto-based approach to leadership, which is different, very different from conventional leadership development. So let's then move on to the next one. Next slide, please, Simon. So the challenge for leaders, which I say to senior leaders, is why launch transformational leadership top-down when a wide and deep employee commitment to such a transformation can be created much quicker and more sustainably by the employees themselves. That more sustainably bit is really important. Generally speaking, in large multinational organizations, senior leaders' careers will take them away from where they might start a process of culture change. The employees, however, tend to be much more geographically located in their local communities. So having the employees themselves owning the culture makes it more sustainable. And in the book, there's a lovely example of a senior director in a rapid mass engagement site being challenged in public by frontline leaders about who owns the culture, and that challenge being successful up I think 3 levels of hierarchy. And indeed the senior leader concerned left the business soon afterwards. Didn't really get it, didn't get the stuff we've just been talking about, thought he was still totally in control, didn't have to manage in a different way, and was then removed. So the employees saw that a senior leader appointed who didn't abide by the culture didn't survive, rather than damage the culture. So James Winters in Cork, on the plant that won the Shingo Prize, quote from him: "We had all the lean process, but it wasn't enough until we adopted the mass engagement process to create the new culture. We were getting frustrated and getting nowhere." And I think those of you will know the performance of that plant in the years after the rapid mass engagement. So that's the challenge. Let's just move on to the next slide, Simon, please. So what is rapid mass engagement? So I can't assume that everyone knows what it is. So it's a method to rapidly change culture via employee engagement and enablement, leveraged by leadership and lead. All employees in the system. So you're not taking a cross section. So you're not having a experiment with some people, a part of the system. The whole system, all the employees within it, and you have to define the system carefully. So co-location is not enough. There has to be real and meaningful interdependencies to make the system a system. But all employees in the system diagnose the major obstacles preventing that system reaching its higher purpose. So the higher purpose is created. In smaller organizations, we've even enable the whole workforce to create the higher purpose. It's much more difficult in bigger organizations, but the employees themselves, not senior management, decide on a Pareto basis what are the most important obstacles preventing the site or the system getting to its higher purpose. And then with their senior management, they agree on a joint change plan by consensus, not by negotiation. So in Boston Scientific, we had nearly 100 people agreeing to that joint change plan by consensus. So every single person had to sign up to give full support to what was agreed. Now that's not unanimity, because if you tried to get unanimity, it'd be impossible with 100 people, but consensus really, really works. And it's not by compromise and not by voting. So it took 48 hours to actually agree that change plan in time duration and 24 hours of contact time. So then the employee-owned high-performance and lean culture is created to sustain initial gains and to equip the system to face new challenges. The key differentiator, and this is important, it's not about involving or consulting employees. In this process, deliberately by design, there's a transfer of power so that employees make decisions. They know the most about what frustrates them at work. They know the most about what repeated issues come up in their work. And they have the power to select what they want within scope to be the agenda for that big joint decision-making event. So that is what rapid mass engagement is. So let's look at how the leveraging works here. So there's a lot on this slide and I haven't got time to go through it all, but when you look at it later, you've got the rapid mass engagement process itself, creating the rapid initial culture change, and it is very rapid. Often before we finish the employee workshops, while they're going on, the culture is already changing. And there's evidence of that in the book. Then you have to have the predict and prevent continuous improvement approaches, because there's no point in relying on what we now call lived experience. We have to test it out by checking it against the data. So we have to use the right ways of testing what the employee's perception are. The good news is that the employee perception of what the big issues are have always been practically 100% accurate. Few tweaks, but because the employees are involved in the data collection and the testing, they understand the tweaks and are happy to own the slight alterations that you make. And then the point about leadership as well. You know, we have to have the right kind of leadership. If you get all three of those working at the same time and leaving each other, you get what I call 1 times 1 times 1 equals 6. I know my arithmetic, so I know 1 times 1 times 1 doesn't equal 6. But when you leverage those things, you get that kind of effect. So next slide, Simon. So who benefits from this? So who are my customers here? So what are people frustrated by the lack of return on investment? So they spent a lot of money on lean or leadership or engagement, and the dial's not moving. The engagement scores are not moving much. The leadership doesn't seem to be working very well. Various studies show about between 6 and 8% of people believe their leadership approach actually adds, works well and adds value, etc. So they're frustrated by having spent a lot of money and effort, and then they come and say, can we do something more powerful? So there's that group. Then you've got market leaders like Boston Scientific who were determined to stay there and wanted to increase the gap between them and their, if you like, competitor sites outside the organization, but also competitor sites within the organization with whom you have to compete for investment and therefore jobs. So one of the outcomes of rapid mass engagement is an increase in actual jobs, often in areas of high unemployment, etc., and even during a recession like in Dupuy. The other end of the scale is when you have organizational units who are facing severe threat. So in recession, plants get shut, divisions get shut, etc. So rapid mass engagement, for example, was used in a plant where they had declared a strike and the corporate culture was one day of strike, close the facility. And we had a week to prevent corporate pressing the button to close the factory. And that factory is still going now 20-something years later. And this last one is very, very recent. A lot of organizations now are suffering from outsourcing important aspects of how employees treat each other, for example, around issues of race and gender, to what I would call political and unscientific off-the-shelf solutions. And this is causing havoc. The number of calls I get from HR directors on this issue at the moment is dramatic. And people are afraid to say anything about it because they're afraid of being abused on social media, etc. But if you can get your workforce to agree how to treat everybody with dignity and respect, and to agree how to do that, then you don't need to rely on these, if you like, political activists invading our organizations at the moment. So how can you use what's in the actual book? You may not be in a position to launch a rapid mass engagement process. You need to be pretty senior to do that. But the philosophy and the methods and the many practical examples in the book, well, you've got to also think about the warnings in the book about the standards required in terms of implementation. They can apply at practically any level. So frontline supervisor or manager, even somebody who's not got managerial experience but influences people, like in support functions and things like that, can use what's in the book. So that's it, guys.
Okay, thanks very much, Frank, for that. Okay, well, we're now going to move on to the interactive part of the session with the poll. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to stop the share. I'm going to launch the rapid mass engagement polls. Essentially, you're going to get invited to the session. Hopefully, I'll click that button now. So you should get an invite, and it's you click the share icon, your ability to get the presentation. Hopefully we've got that. Everyone okay with that? A few thumbs up there. Okay, so here's the code if you want to use the website. Obviously, if you've got the interactive the app, then that's not a problem. So we've got a few questions to get things going. I shall now click for the first one. Now, this is a bit of an icebreaker question. What we want you to do is just to write a word that summarizes your overall attitude to culture change. So you should be able to do this now, I think, and you will see the response come up. I'll basically be in charge of timing and give everyone enough time to put something in before we close the voting. Okay, I have a few more seconds and then we'll do a reveal. Okay, let's have a look at these answers. So here we go. Words that summarize your attitude. Few challenging ones there. Plus the word challenging, funny enough. Frank, any just...
Well, change the system, culture change is free is what I mean by the systems only fallacy. It's true, but it can be accelerated a lot if you work on the other aspects of your 4-cylinder engine, in my opinion.
Good. Yes, I think some good mix there, positives.
Rewarding for sure. Yeah.
Okay.
It's not, I'd say it's not as hard as people think.
Okay, well, let's move on. That was our icebreaker. Make sure you got used to using the system. Right, this is a state your level of agreement or disagreement with these statements. So you've got 4 statements. Culture change takes years. Leadership is a contact sport. Working from home is good for long-term employee engagement. And making jobs graduate entry is good for employee engagement. So this is a move the slide and show your agreement or disagreement with each of those. So let's get the answers. Results showing come up in real time as people vote here, so you can see how
Yeah. It's like Eurovision.
we're better than that, surely.
Interesting.
Okay, I mean, I think that's looks like there's a few more votes. Feel free to keep voting whilst Frank makes some comments on this. Leadership's a contact sport. That's one of your statements, isn't it, Frank?
It is, yeah. I'm glad it's getting good support on the whole. Yeah, culture change takes years is an interesting one because that is the conventional mindset. I think we've demonstrated that it can be rapid, but obviously you have to sustain it for years and years.
What does the contact sport mean, Frank?
It means that leadership is done in conversations with people. So it's the quality and the quantity of the conversations that you have that'll make a difference, which is behind the cathedral model: quantity times quantity of recognition, coaching, constructive feedback, etc. Working from home made it difficult, but not impossible. It made it possible to have the quantity, but the quality, the body language, the little clues you can pick up around the conversation is obviously very difficult on a screen, especially if people have their cameras switched off.
And all this working from home we've had, obviously, since the pandemic, what do you think that the impact of that's going to be in, say, 3 or 4 years' time?
Well, for some employees, it's doing some jobs at certain stages of their career. It's obviously a really good thing. The danger is that senior people, relatively senior people who've made their career, are happy then to almost semi-retire from home and do the task element of the job and not do the mentoring, coaching, helping the new generations learn part that they benefited from in the past. So, on the other end, the new people coming in don't know what they're missing by missing that because they've never experienced it. So there's 2 dangerous populations in there that we need to manage carefully. But I think generally thinking about how to make it best for employees to do the best job is a good thing. We just have to weigh up a lot of factors with that.
What about that graduate entry question, statement rather? Not much agreement with that.
Well, the intention, Blair Brown government, they thought that by making nursing a graduate entry profession, that this would enhance the self-esteem of nurses. So their intention was good, but if you do any kind of ABC analysis, you know, what we're doing, then what actual behavioral response, we've got behavioral responses like too posh to wash, nurses, graduate nurses not being able to do basic fundamental aspects of nursing, etc. So major policy error there. I mean, the way to think about it is the effect on the non-graduate nurses. So imagine if you had a loved one in a hospital, seriously ill, in pain. Which would you prefer, a graduate nurse with no empathy and compassion, or a non-graduate nurse with tons of empathy and compassion? I think when you ask the question that way, it's obvious that we need to train nurses, but going through some sort of academic process is divisive and cuts off a lot of potentially excellent nurses from the profession. It also means a lot of time is used when nurses should be on the wards preparing for examinations and things like that. So it's had all sorts of unintended consequences. Well-meaning though, but part of the leadership training I do is to look at, can we predict and prevent those kind of errors in our own organizations? And the answer is yes. But for politicians, it's very hard for them to learn because their election cycle is 5 years at most. So in the short run, it looked good, it got good publicity. The longer term effect is a different matter.
Okay, but and just on that, culture change takes years. I mean, is a sort of 50-50 split there, if you like. What is realistic to expect?
Yeah,
to me,
well, we have examples of the culture changing within weeks, sometimes within a week. So the mindset that it takes years is part of the mindset that's very difficult. It is difficult, but if you produce powerful enough levers to move people emotionally so that their commitment to their organization and their work and their colleagues and their community, that's where higher purpose comes in rather than just purpose, then it's amazing what can happen very, very quickly. And it has happened, and the book actually records the evidence of it happening. So the idea that it takes years when there's demonstrable examples where it hasn't, it takes years to sustain it and keep it going for long. You know, of course that does, but the actual change itself can be done within weeks.
Okay, great. Well, thanks for your thoughts on that. Let's move on to the next one. We've got here, which is the most important in order to sustain a joint management employee change plan. So you've got to choose between compromise, quantified objectives, consensus, majority voting, regular review points. I think you've just got one option on this, so please fire away.
Oh, wow. It's interesting on compromise. Interesting, this. I want to address the quantified objectives one as well. Totally agree with the regular review points.
Okay, so we've got it's just been.
Can I address this in two halves, Simon? Compromise versus consensus depends on what you're doing. So if the decision is not a major decision that requires a massive amount of buy-in, then compromise can often work. So when you're looking at decision-making methods, the key thing is to, before you make the decision, decide what kind of decision it is first. So once you've diagnosed what kind of decision we're about to make, that determines the optimum decision-making method. And for something where the entire workforce is going to create its own culture and its own change plan, clearly that's consensus. lower level, less important decisions, compromise, or even, you know, one person making a decision can be appropriate. The key is define what kind of decision it is first. On the quantified objectives, this is interesting, because what I get this with senior leaders all the time. And what I say to them is, you don't know yet what's possible. So if you're trying to make quantified objectives from a position of not knowing what's possible, you are going to undershoot. Wait until the rapid mass engagement surprises the hell out of you and produces things you didn't think were possible, and then start to engage with that, with the workforce, and you'll get much closer to very high levels of performance, etc. I'm always asked this, what should our objectives be? And I said, I don't know yet. You know, we do know what you're trying to achieve as an organization, and everything is towards that, but how we particularly are going to get there, what the plan's going to be, what the proportion, how we're going to prioritize that, we don't know yet. The process is emergent. Now, some senior leaders say to me, can you guarantee we'll get this outcome? And I say, no, because the process is emergent and because it has to have authenticity, it has to be live and capable of producing whatever it produces. So I can't manipulate the outcome. It's like having a public consultation on something and then ignoring all the answers. You know, you do, if you're going to engage your workforce, for them to put the commitment into the process, they've got to believe that the process is authentic, not predetermined by senior management. And I get this also with corporate values and stuff. People say, oh, well, can we ask the employees to create their culture based on our values? And I say, no, because if you restrict what the employees are thinking about, you're restricting the values they create, or the behavioral standards they create locally will be designed to be more powerful than your corporate values, and they'll be local, owned by the workforce, culturally aligned to wherever the geographical location is, and in the language that employees normally use, not management stuff. So this is that quantified objectives one is an important discussion we have at that diagnostic and decision-making event with senior leaders.
Which one would you put as most important then, Frank?
Oh,
Scott?
I think consensus versus compromise depends. Regular review points, provided you're not surveying the hell out of your workforce so they get survey fatigue. I would go for much more participative, kind of workshopy kind of review sessions, rather than constantly bombarding them with surveys. The other thing that's really interesting is if you allow the workforce with the right technical guidance to design the employee engagement surveys aligned to what's in the change plan, then the employee participation rate and engagement with those surveys goes through the roof. Because essentially what the employees are doing is, we said we'd do this, by then, how are we doing? Let's find out. So everyone has an interest in filling in the forms, etc. But add to that much more into participative events where ideas can be delved into, so that you're getting much more than simply answers to questions.
Okay, great. All right, let's move on to the next slide. This is another state your level of agreement with only two statements here about coaching.
Yeah.
Coaching is rationed by cost, that's statement one, and coaching should be targeted at high performance, statement two. So two statements on coaching, so please.
Both deliberately provocative.
Okay.
So what does 2.3 mean there, Simon, on coaching?
That's
Is
the average score.
average score, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, can we have a quick look at that one? Part of this is the way we look at coaching, and a lot of organizations, you know, it's seen as executive coaching, costs a lot of money, it's one-to-one, and very few employees in the organization get the opportunity to do that. So in practice, the high-performing leaders in the organization get access to some was regarded as very good coaches to make their own career progress further, etc., etc. That's what happens in practice. Whereas another model is to say that coaching is a skill that everyone can learn, and that all employees can learn how to coach each other in their day-to-day work, in which case, once you've trained them, the actual cost is zero. So that zero cost, if you like, democratic, it's a skill for everyone rather than a skill that's confined to a small number of people or management only, is what that question is getting at. The second one is interesting, very interesting. This comes from the confusion between coaching and constructive feedback. So I'd imagine, I'll ask everyone to go and look at your company's or your organization's disciplinary procedure. And I would imagine, and I would bet, that the vast majority of you have coaching in your disciplinary procedure. So what that does, first of all, it's a confusion between coaching and constructive feedback. But what it does is it makes employees believe that coaching is for people who are low performers in the disciplinary procedure or people like that. And that acts as a barrier to the day-to-day coaching, which arises from seeing coaching as more democratic in the first question. So if you can see, if you think about this, your high performers, let's imagine I have a team. This side of me, this part of my team is working tremendously well, hitting all their targets, great teamwork, everything's superb. Over here, this part of the team's in trouble. Where am I naturally attracted to? So I get attracted to where the problems are. And I look back to the guys doing a good job and I think to myself, oh, they're okay, they're fine. That is complacent, and that is neglecting the development potential of your highest performers. And in terms of return on investment, using your finite coaching time to focus on the people who are already performing brilliantly will produce a much higher rate of return on investment. Yes, you may use coaching while you're talking to low performers, especially to diagnose what's the cause of it, etc. But do not neglect and focus on your highest performers who, with the right values and the right attitudes, who normally get neglected naturally. What we naturally do to high performers is, after a while, underappreciate them, overwork them, and underdevelop them. And one of the reasons we underdevelop them is we think they're all right, so we don't devote enough coaching time to them. That's what those two questions are about. That should generate some debate somewhere, Simon.
Yeah,
in the chat or something.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you
got something from Jane on the chat. Bill.
Yeah, how do I respond to the chat?
Okay, Jane, if you want to unmute yourself, just respond.
Yeah, sure. Hi, Frank. Really interesting session, and I might have to disappear early. Apologies for our own
Don't worry,
bit of
Jane.
mass engagement on my current project. But yeah, just on coaching, I'm a sort of internal coach with my organisation. But yeah, I just wanted to say yes. Okay, it's not financial cost, but it is cost to the business in terms of my time. I often end up doing it in my own time,
Yes.
actually, for the headspace.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
yeah, it's, you know, it's not without an impact and an opportunity cost. And, you know, we've had chairman downwards saying we want a coaching culture, but when you're kind of taking time out for the CPDs, it's really tricky. And I
Yeah,
reinforce
exactly.
to my clients, don't turn up late, don't cancel at the last minute, because
Yeah.
like, you know, this is a massive piece of voluntary work that I do. Basically, I kind of frame it to them like that.
Yeah, and the thing is, imagine in rapid mass engagement, we train internal facilitators. So shop floor employees train directors when they come into the organization about the culture, and they have the facilitation skills to do that. If you have large group of internal facilitators being trained as coaches, just walking around the organization all over the place, and the way we do it is so that you never have to go very far. There's always a trained facilitator close to you doing the same job as you, just so you can just go and have a chat, or they can. So if you have that much coaching going on, can you imagine the level of improvement? And it also demystifies coaching. It shows that it's not for bad people or doing naughty stuff. You know, it's a great skill that we can all master. You know,
Yeah.
So I've shop floor employees, warehouse people, clerks trained as coaches, not through the accreditation route, but trained through the leadership skills that we talked about earlier. So they day to day, they know how to coach, they know how to diagnose and then problem solve, and they know the right questions to ask in the right order to get the right result. And some of the coaching is 1 minute, 2 minute. Can be at a coffee machine, it can be on a shop floor, it could be walking from one meeting to another. That's what I mean by that kind of coaching.
Okay, great. Well, let's move on. Next slide coming up is a ranking one. So you're going to rank the follow in order of importance in driving recognition. So you've got award schemes, coaching, incentives, bonuses, knowing what works, open communication, rapid promotion cycles. So you've got to put them in an order of importance, first obviously being the most important. So please start clicking away.
I love this process, Simon. That's brilliant.
It takes a bit longer to consider this one before you click your button.
That's a tremendous outcome. There's so much confusion between reward and recognition. Ooh, award schemes are going up. Yeah. Maybe 4 and 5 are the same, are they? So we have to add them together.
Yeah, I mean, I think award schemes is more like sort of employee of the month type of thing.
Yeah, yeah, I get it. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, we've had most in. I mean, a few more might come in now, but open communications looks like the most voted important.
Well, it's the motherhood and apple pie option, isn't it? Yeah, we want open communications, obviously, but specifically on recognition, there's an interesting relationship with coaching. So it's brilliant that that's come second. I demonstrate it this way. Yeah, I say to people, if I give you recognition and you respect me, what happens to you at self-image level? You know, people say it goes up. What happens to your confidence? It goes up. People say, I said, well, if you're more confident, what happens to your receptivity to any external input? People say you become more receptive. So if you're more receptive and I spend some time with you and you learn things, how much do you learn when you're more receptive rather than less receptive? People say, oh, we learn more than otherwise. And then I say to them, so if you now go and act on what you've just learned, so you do something that you did before better, or you do something you didn't do before that is excellent, what happens to my natural opportunity to give you recognition because you've done something better or you've done something new that was good? So when you get coaching working well, it keeps the recognition fresh and new and dynamic. so that you never run out of reasons to give recognition, and that helps the authenticity. So my own vote would be coaching would be number one, but knowing what works and what doesn't would be very close to it. And I take the open communications as a given, if you like. So, but the key thing is separate recognition from reward of any type. And if you are going to do tangible recognition, be very, very thoughtful about how you do it, because it does suffer from diminishing returns, whereas non-tangible recognition doesn't. And there's all sorts of unintended consequences similar to reward with giving people stuff, if you like. So it's an interesting area. So my focus is on non-tangible recognition, on making sure no one is ever taken for granted.
Yeah, see that incentives and bonuses come pretty low down there in people's views.
Which is great. I mean, interestingly, if you operate all of this process, you do get rapid promotion cycles, because management's awareness of what employees were capable of changes as employees devote more of their discretionary effort to work. So one particular example, the general manager of the whole factory said about a particular employee, he said, she's in the same body, but she's not the same person. Having promoted her twice over the last 18 months. And I said, no, she is the same person. It's just that now she's committed to what you're trying to do. And previously she was just doing her job. So you do tend to get rapid promotion cycles as an outcome of doing coaching and recognition and rapid mass engagement and stuff like that.
Okay, great. Well, let's move on to the next one, which is which two are necessary for rapid and mass culture change. So there's wide employee engagement, consensual employee engagement, focused employee engagement, and deep employee engagement. So you're going to choose two out of those four. So you might have to think about those. And
should I explain the difference between?
Yeah, I was going to say, it's probably worth, Frank, just going through what you mean by those. If you're those,
Yeah. Wide means the number of people engaged in the process. Deep is how deeply they're engaged. So, for example, the employees who are elected by their peers to go to the joint decision-making event called Consensus Day, they are going to go through all the major issues in the business that have come up, prioritized by their peers, and work together as a group. So their engagement is massively deeper than the employees who voted them to go there in the first place. So that's what we mean. Now you need both. You need wide and you want deep, but obviously you're encouraging them to only pick two, which means leaving one out. Yeah.
What does focused mean?
Yeah, you do need to engage for a reason. You know, it has to be a organizational goal or objective that you're trying to achieve. You can't just say, let's engage the workforce, you know, be engaged. You know, there has to be some sort of focus so that we know what's moving us in the right direction towards true north, if you like. There is a problem with, if you might call it, happiness stuff. Let's make the employees happy. Well, in competitive situations where you've got global competitors who can take your work and your jobs, being happy could be a prelude to losing your job. So happiness is an outcome of engagement. It's not a destination. So making sure you focus on what you're trying to do there is important.
So deep employee engagement and wide seem to be the two.
I agree with that. Yeah. But you do need to know why you're doing it. Yeah. Anything on the chat on this?
And anything's come up at the moment.
Okay.
All right, let's move on. We've got an agreement and disagreement with this statement. It is axiomatic that the system will govern behaviour, do nothing to the people, culture change is free. We just touched on
That's a quote. That's a quote from John Seddon.
Yeah. So
Of our colleagues at Cardiff, who I have a lot of time and respect for.
Yes, he was a visiting professor for a few years with us there. We disagree with John's statements.
This is interesting. Yeah. You see, the statement's true, but misleading. So I could agree strongly with the statement, but I'd have to caveat it. And it's interesting for the chat to think about why it's misleading. And my argument about why it's misleading is, yes, it's true. No matter how engaged the workforce is, the processes can destroy their engagement by frustrating them. That's the point about enablement. But why not work on both at the same time? Because you can accelerate the benefits. That's the name of my business. Accelerated improvement is precisely that. By the way, Simon, at Cardiff, the students always wanted a debate between me and John on this. But I could never encourage John to get in the same room to have this discussion. And I think John was thinking more, when he wrote this, about the traditional top-down, traditional culture change stuff, rather than something like rapid mass engagement. But I'd still, if you can organize it, we can still have the debate anytime you like. Anything on the chat?
No. Okay, let's move on to the next question. Poll. A fairly simple one, this one. It's sort of a false, not sure, true. The biggest cause of disillusionment of high-performing employees is management failure to quickly and robustly deal with low performance. So another statement that you think is that you've used false, not sure, true on that.
Yeah, deliberately provocative.
They generally are more seem to think it's true. Do you want to give some context?
Yeah, it's interesting. 50% are either not sure or think it's false, and 50%, roughly speaking, believe it's true. I just found this from literally dealing with so many thousands of employees as part of the initial workshops. Obviously, you get to hear what people feel about their own management, because their management are not allowed to be in the room so that they can speak freely. And I was just taken aback by how often this came up, particularly by the more reflective people who might have been quiet early on, who talked about the frustration of trying to get high standards when people alongside them were not pulling their weight in various ways. And it was remarkable how often this point came up with a lot of passion from, and then so it's an interesting one, because naturally we think that, you know, things like bullying, intimidation, not knowing what you're doing would disillusion people more than this. But I was absolutely gobsmacked by how fierce the appeal was. Can you please get our management to deal with the people who are not allowing us to do our job properly because of their own low standards in various ways? It was amazingly powerful. And I address it in detail in the book.
Okay, great. Thanks for that. What's next then? We've got another state your level of agreement in relation to your organization's leadership training. It's a specific question on your organization's leadership training. It is designed to meet the needs of time-poor, high-performing leaders working at stress in highly competitive sectors. It actively deprioritizes low-value content. It has the systematic two-way accountability between senior leadership team and other leaders, covering implementation and improvements covered. And it systematically reinforces improvement science in its single sector in particular, and scientific thinking generally. So some fairly meaty ones there. So we'll give you some time to consider those in relation to your own. And if it doesn't perhaps relate to your organization, think about it to your general experience.
Simon, it's 1.8 out of what? So what would the strongly disagree maximum be?
I think is it 5? I think I haven't got the actual, because I'm not voting. I can't see the exact.
Okay.
Can someone confirm it's 5?
Five, yeah, there we go. They're actually very favourable results compared to the surveys done on these issues. So this particular group of people are relatively fortunate compared to most people in terms of how their leadership development is organised, which is great news, guys.
Generally more down the disagreement end of the scale.
Yeah.
And which in
How do we interpret? How would you interpret that as a percentage, though? 5 would be strongly disagree would be 0, presumably.
Yeah. That's
so 2.5 means half of the people in our group today have that systematic accountability, which is
it's more, that's the average rating. We don't know how many people have made that rating. So
yeah, but that's much higher than most surveys. So well done, guys. Maybe it's the work you do back in your own organizations that has created this. So well done.
Maybe it's predominantly lean practitioners and specialists on this course. So maybe there's there's something there. But so you think that what's the biggest problem you think with most organizations leadership training in terms of?
Well, for example, a lot of leadership development is not designed to meet the needs of time-poor, high-performing leaders. So you get things developed which are just practically impossible to do on a night shift, in a warehouse or something like that. You could do it in an office where you had lots of stuff around you, but to try and do that on a busy night shift on a production line or in a warehouse, it ties up the frontline leader into lots of stuff rather than working with their team to, help their team meet their objectives, etc., and coach them. There's often on the low value content, a lot of people don't know what's low value. So a lot of my work was testing what adds value and what doesn't. And a lot of appraisal investment has a very low or sometimes negative return on investment compared to the daily skills of recognition, coaching, constructive feedback. The accountability to go and implement what you just learned is relatively uncommon. So that's a great score for this group. Often people go off on training, come back, and it's up to them to decide what to do rather than having it systematically embedded into the way the organization makes change. And the lack of connection with lean, etc., is very, very common, especially outside manufacturing, but even common within manufacturing, and particularly poor in parts of the public sector. So they're surprising scores. So that's excellent to see that progress.
Okay, great. Let's move on. So this is, again, for you to write in words of your choice, what 3 topics should executives be thinking about now and strategizing for in order to prepare for the world in 5 years' time? Obviously, there's a sort of a culture change leadership theme that we want you to have a look at, but generally, if you can write 3 words, and they will I'll give you a few seconds to write those now, and then we'll reveal them shortly. So anything really. So I mean, I'm not saying it's going to be HR or leadership culture. What are the things that we should be thinking about now? Okay, keep writing. For those who haven't put some words in, let's reveal some of them so we can have a look at.
AI is coming up, eh?
Not surprising, not surprising at all.
I like diversity for strength.
Sustainability as well coming up.
What the diversity for strength? Whoever wrote that, could they talk to us? It's a really interesting one.
It was me again.
Hello, Paul.
Hi, Frank. Yeah, I think experience of working somewhere with quite a lot of cultural age experience and neurodiversity.
Yes.
In years for me, it has made me realize that actually having all those different people in the group makes us a lot more creative and open to change and sharing ideas and coming out with things that I certainly wouldn't have thought about, and people that have come from the same background as me wouldn't have necessarily thought about as well. So
There's a lovely, in one rapid mass engagement, there was a lady in one of the workshops with a stammer, and we were talking about the issue of respect and dignity, if you like, in the new culture. And she said, all through my life, people have assumed I'm stupid because of the way I speak. And when the employees were training out the new culture to all the other employees, we use that as an example of, assuming things about people because of, things that are not reflective of them as a person. It just happened she couldn't speak very well, It made a big difference. Coaching for the benefit of all. Yeah. Yes. Good to see you. Good to see you, Paul.
you guys too.
Right. Well, let's see. We've got another one. I'm going to think about allocating. You've got 100 points to allocate amongst these enablers to successful culture change. So you basically got to put a number against each one. Hopefully it adds up to 100 at the end of it. So you've got aligned brand and reputation, engagement enablement, evidence-based change decisions, highly skilled leadership, principled resistance to fashionable and divisive trends with no objectivity, transformative HR function, end user focus and values, employee-owned behavioral standards. So you're gonna. It's a ranking one, but we're using these sort of make sure it adds up to 100. So we start putting some figures in. Again, we give you a few extra seconds to do the maths.
We'd like all of them, wouldn't we?
Oh, well, this is the skill.
Values, yeah. I'm glad to see my own X function getting on the scoreboard there a little bit. Ah. Interesting. We comment, Simon?
Yeah, there might be a few more coming through. We've
Oh, okay, good.
Just see if anyone else
Might
wants
change
to-
it, yeah? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, you may as well start with a comment, Frank, whilst people are still putting them. They might
Yeah,
change.
okay. It's great to see employee-owned behavioural standards at the top, because that's one of the outcomes of rapid mass engagement. But most organisations don't do it that way. So, and it's relatively easy to do, but not easy to do very well. So it's great to see that at the top, engagement enablement. Yeah. HR function, my own X function, you know, we have a big role and sometimes we can get in the way. So that's important. Yeah.
The point is that all these are useful.
Yeah.
That's the point.
And
It's,
they've jumped around a lot. Yeah. Some of the things we've done in HR have been in the wrong direction. So, you know, my own profession needs to think about that. Well-intentioned, but in the wrong direction. You know, we can easily put up things that get in the way of employees, make it more difficult. For example, if they have to ring somebody at a call center because all the support services have been offshored, it just reduces the engagement of the employees with the process. Yeah. But it saves money in the short run.
the last one there, principle of resistance to fashionable
Yeah.
divisive trend. What sort of things?
Well, what we're getting is one HR director talked to me recently and said, one of the guys we brought in told us that Martin Luther King was a racist. And I said, you know, and it's caused a big uproar. Another one had their HR person almost run out of town from the factory for telling them that they were all privileged. You know, it was an area which doesn't have much diversity. So it wasn't very helpful to getting a sensible conversation on things like diversity. So there's that kind of stuff going on. You know, there's a lot of politics being brought in to workforces, which is having very divisive effects. And people are afraid of it as well because they get abused if they don't toe the line. So it's the opposite of engagement. Some people are swallowing it whole and other people are resisting it, but everybody's afraid of the issue. That's what's going on. It's particularly strong in the public sector, but it's also strong in the private sector too, especially among US companies.
Okay,
You get the aligned brand and reputation if you got all the others right, probably. Yeah.
Okay, we're coming out of time, so let's just move on. It's our last question, actually, so we're not doing too bad. So we just want you to write a couple of words that you've now familiar with the model, the rapid mass engagement model. So just in your own words, write a couple down, and I think we're going to generate a word cloud on this as a sort of a bit of output. could be on any, it could be it's how it likens its
Could
problem.
be rubbish.
Yeah. It's not, there's no linkage to a name, whatever we put down.
I'm just
I
going to.
can't type anything on this, so don't worry about that.
I can't see it, Simon, because on the right. Hang on a second.
We've only
There
got
Yeah,
one
I
at the
see it now.
moment. So.
I like integrated. Okay.
You're going to couple more. A few more coming through.
What does forward mean? Anyone?
I would assume that's a sort of forward thinking, or
Forward thinking. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I get it.
Okay. Anyone else want to put a few more in? If not,
Yes, this is Linda. I made the comment of forward and I did mean forward thinking. Sorry, I was, yep.
Thank you.
Correct.
Good. Okay. I think we'll close it off there. Well, we're not going to do this one because we've run out of time. Really, this is only if we had a bit more time left. So we shall. We'll stop